news, how to
Fake news.
protect yourself, and how to be able to talk to each other about our different opinions. So I'm sorry, Colleen, you're not here to introduce it, but I think we can go on from here, right?
Yes.
All right.
When we do, we write up an article, we use sources. I've interviewed several physicians, MDs, to give medical.
Oh, shoot. Come on. Let's try that again.
When we do, we write up an article, we use sources. I've interviewed several physicians, MDs, to give medical scientific information that contradicts claims that are being made. And we source them and we post our articles online with links and hyperlinks and all sorts of elements, so people can see, and they can obviously form their own opinion. But what we do is we flag these.
Oh, come on.
These posts on Facebook, so that if you do share content that has false information, you get a little notification that pops up that says, you are sharing false information. It was rated false by a third-party fact checker. Read below the reasons why. And people can, again, believe it or not, they're allowed to have their own opinions, of course. It's a free country. But, that information needs to be out there. And I feel strongly, as someone who, even as a First Amendment advocate, I still feel that sharing dangerously false information, particularly about a pandemic, where lives are at stake, I think it's crucial that if false information is being shared, that it be countered with information that isn't. And so that's why I think this is a really, as I say, this is doing the Lord's work. I truly believe it in many ways. It's not supposed to be PR. There's a difference.
Right.
PR is public relations. Journalism is reporting facts. Do journalists make mistakes? I say this again, yes, they do make mistakes, but they are, bound by, practical ethics and journalistic guidelines where they have to correct their mistakes and put out corrections. And I don't see fake news sites doing that. It's dangerous information that gets out there from all sorts of sources, and that's why we exist, to try to share what we hope people will believe is factual information. But again, they're going to make up their own minds. They're going to believe what they want to believe, and that's their right.
So that reminds me. So you actually set up a time to talk to political strategists on both sides to get their take on it. Before we watch the video, could you tell me what that was like to talk to those two guys?
Yeah, I used to look after a news program out of Los Angeles for CNN International, and I had two regular guests, a Democratic strategist and a Republican consultant, and they're actually frenemies. That's what they like to call each other. They're friends.
How cute.
Who are both, on different sides of the political spectrum. And we met at a sushi restaurant in Studio City, and then I filmed them. And just asked for their sort of take on looking at fake news through the political spectrum. Take a look.
There's just such a volume of information. Even those credible outlets even occasionally cause you to scratch your head and go, how credible really is it when they jump the shark and make a mistake?
It's more subjective and it plays into their emotions. And I think perhaps sometimes the facts and objectiveness are more boring. So if you're a voter and you're not, furiously sort of Googling news stories on a regular basis, looking for objective information, you're just scrolling through your newsfeed on social media, you probably came across misinformation and perhaps might have believed those facts. I mean, let's face it, Donald Trump won the election by 80,000 or so votes. And I'm fully confident that that was a number of voters that perhaps could have been swayed one way or another.
I think it played a role. To think that a few $100,000 of Facebook ads spread across the country flipped a race that was not a low information contest seems to me a bit of a stretch. My opponents, just like my candidates, should be able to literally say whatever they want. And it's the job of our opposition and their supporters to exploit that and expose that.
I just think that this should be a bipartisan issue. I think both parties should be of the mindset that we need objective information, that should be fact-based information that is not misleading the public. I think that's a disservice to our democracy and to what this country was founded upon.
You mentioned that your parents are obviously your intended, beneficiary / sounding board for developing these tips. But in your project, you also talk about how to listen and get along with with people who disagree with you or are following different news sources. And again, you talked to Dr. Flores. And tell me about why you included this in your project and why you think it's important.
Yeah, I think it was just something that I thought about before I reached out to her, is that I really wanted to do something on the topic of, how to talk to others about sharing fake news. And, again, it stems back to conversations I've had, with my own parents. And, she offered really awesome advice on how it's not just really sharing fake news, it's really kind of meeting people halfway in any conversation. How many times have you sat across the table from someone and had a political conversation and it just got so heated because you weren't listening to them and they weren't listening to you? And I thought she shared some really good advice just on navigating that situation. So check that out.
You don't need to prove someone wrong in order for you to be right. And so you're just going to be like kind of going with it. That's kind of like what the advice that I give. It's like, in your mindset what you believe in. And so like if you believe firmly in it, you don't need to defend it as much, but you don't need to argue about everything. Additionally, I suggest that, and everybody will take a deep breath with this one, at least once a week, watch the other side. Read articles from the other side. At least once a week, right? Because you want to be well informed, and then consider the possibility that maybe 10% or 20%, whatever you wish, might be true, so that you could get a little bit more awareness of what's happening. And thirdly, most of the time, an argument will subside or reduce, like the tension will reduce if you just listen without thinking about what you're going to respond back, right? You're just listening. You might actually learn something too as you're listening. And then you give two positives and one critique. So for example, you make a really good point with that. I never thought of it this way, like I'm definitely going to look into that. However, have you considered ... right? And so this way it makes someone more open to discussion once they realize that, okay, you are actually actively listening to them and considering their stance. Lastly, I'm encouraging people to take a break from social media, maybe just like, 1 or 2 days if possible. Everybody seems to be addicted to it nowadays, but just to remember that you still have this whole other life out there, right? And you don't have to get into these battles every single day. It's just kind of good for you to just recharge and not and not participate in all of this.
Before I let you go back to your very busy life, what question should I ask you that we haven't covered yet here today?
Well, I think there is one dangerous area of fake news that poses a concern down the road that we haven't really talked about, and that's deepfakes. And deepfakes are these artificial manipulated videos where sound bites or video have been manipulated to show people saying things that they didn't really say. And I put together a video about that on my site, sofake.net, which you can check out later. But deepfakes pose a real concern, because what if someone creates a video of a CEO saying something and it manipulates the stock price, or a video is shared of a presidential candidate saying something he never said, and people will believe it even if they deny they ever said it, So artificial intelligence has gotten so advanced that people can create these high-tech videos that look very real. So I do think, one of these dangerous fronts in the fight against fake news is going to be these deep fake videos. And I think a lot of people are right to be concerned about it, because, can we as fact checkers keep up with technology? That's the real question here. So it's going to be something we're going to have to keep an eye on.
This was very truly surprising for me.
So a deepfake video is a video made with the aid of artificial intelligence that portrays someone doing and or saying something that they never actually did or said.
He was like trying to place me, So he sat down next to me. He's like, I love your work.
This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet.
It's a bit of an arms race in the sense that for every advance that people working on detecting deepfakes make, those who are designing methods to create deepfakes can stay a step ahead. And so yes, the tools exist to detect deepfakes, but they're not perfect. Just because we read something in print or on social media doesn't mean it's necessarily true. We now need to unlearn the habit that we have of assuming that just because we see something on video, it necessarily happened.
Ryan, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to do this for us. And my Rotary Club thanks you very much as well. Before I let you go back to your very busy life, is there anything else you want to share with us?
Well, thanks again for having me. I really like Escondido, having visited there, and seeing your place before we went to the Gonzaga game in San Diego. It was just a lovely place, and so I'm sure you all enjoy living there very much. The only thing I would say is just to reinforce what was in one of my videos, and if you take nothing else away, remember this: think before you believe, check before you share. That's the best advice for navigating the crazy world of social media, because there's just a lot of silliness and a lot of crazy stuff out there. But I think that advice can serve us all well as we continue our online activities.
All right, perfect. And then from there, I'm going to roll to the references. I did not.
Yeah, well, that's what the first 15 minutes was for. There's 43 people online. I have your